Hello, everyone. I'm Whitney Ortiz, host of the Whole Health series, and I'm really pleased that Saleema Vellani is able to be here and share her tremendous wisdom. Saleema is an award-winning serial entrepreneur, keynote speaker, professor, and author of Innovation Starts With I. For over 12 years, Saleema has led 100 plus international organizations, nonprofits, and Fortune 500 companies to their next stage of growth and innovation. She's also founded and led multiple ventures with 3 successful exits and co-led groundbreaking research. Currently, she's the founder and CEO of Ripple Impact, which is a virtual business accelerator that helps entrepreneurs scale up their businesses while increasing their influence and impact. Saleema also teaches design thinking and entrepreneurship at Johns Hopkins University, and she's a frequent guest lecturer at business schools. Thank you so much, Saleema, for joining us and sharing your inspiring messages today amongst all that is going on with women leaders who are really looking to step forward to more visibly make a bolder and broader impact and to create the kind of innovations that each sector is really calling for. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Whitney, for having me. I'm really excited.
Your work is so inspiring, and you offer a lot of practical guidance too that people can immediately apply into their considerations of their next steps. So to frame our conversation, how would you describe the era that we're entering into or merging into right now?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, since I think that I like to call it, we've heard the new normal, then the new normal got old, and then there's the next normal, and now that's getting old. And so I like to call it the XNormal because it's just undefined. I think that we're just going to be entering different versions of what normal means. And I think that we won't really have a normal. I think there will be some subtle into some sort of like movement into, after we get through this period of time, and probably a few years from now, we'll hit some level of normality. But again, I think that we're going to see transitions are basically a trend where we will have to keep reinventing ourselves. And so just the way that there are different versions of normal that we're entering constantly, I also think that we as humans, especially as women professionals, are going to have to reinvent ourselves, as we already are seeing. We have to constantly reinvent ourselves and discover and unleash that new version of ourselves and take a more proactive approach to reinvention versus being reactive.
Yes, that's a lot to consider and think about. And how do you give advice to those women right now who are going through this tremendous turmoil of considerations while there's so much change going on around them, thinking, where is their place now? How has their life gotten them to this moment? Are there any particular words of wisdom or guidance that come to you?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing to have when it comes to innovation, what's key, which is often ignored or underrated, is having self-awareness. I think that knowing ourselves, not just through the lens of ourselves, but how other people see us as well, and having that self-awareness is really key, because we're moving into a future that we already are in the future of work. And so being human, or being able to have these human capabilities, which my book talks a lot about, these different human capabilities, be able to context switch and be able to, through knowing yourself, be able to adapt to different environments and at different paces of change. And so when I say that, it means that I think that we have to have more of a portfolio career, which is something that I built for myself, not because I intended to or even knew that term a few years ago, but essentially, it was the story of my life when I was in survival mode, when I couldn't get a job in 2009 and entered a crisis during the financial recession, and had to become an entrepreneur without realizing I was an entrepreneur, but doing what I could do in survival mode to build something that would sustain myself, that grew into a successful business, a translation business, while I was living in Italy. But yeah, I was doing a lot of things out of survival mode that turned into very successful ventures. And when I tried really hard to innovate and really tried hard to solve a problem, I usually failed at that, because I think that we have to work with what we have and leverage our existing strengths, and building that self-awareness to know what are our biggest strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are, looking at I have this tool that helps you find your sweet spot, because I think that it's not just about discovering. I think we have to work on developing. I think that there's too much emphasis on trying to find your why and trying to figure out what it is that you want to do or what problem you want to solve. I think we need to stop asking ourselves that all the time, and that could lead to a lot of rumination and like trying to, you can get into this really deep spiral and hit a black hole with a lot of questioning, and we can become very self-absorbed when we try to do too much introspection. So I like to take a more active approach to introspection, and I call it active introspection, where it combines reflection, it combines getting feedback from other people on how they see you, actually taking an active approach into incorporating that feedback, and then going ahead and reflecting again and going through that process where you're trying to get to know yourself as you step into this new version of yourself. And I think that's key, is to take a more proactive approach to reinvention by doing that work. And being part of communities like this one is also really important, because we don't do things alone.
Mm-hmm. I love your collaborative approach, basically how you approach your entire life, your businesses, your work as a professor. Everything is very thoughtful, and you encourage women to really take that time to pause, to think, to integrate all of the experiences, to thus be able to step out as who we all are now in this moment of time. And how you say it can be overwhelming as well sometimes to think about everything as a reinvention or an evolution, but instead really think, okay, here I am in this moment, and then weave things together. You have a term for it that you use, the hybridpreneur, and really seeing yourself as an expression of all that has come under your umbrella. Can you elaborate even more on that in terms of your personal brand in this state of affairs now?
Yeah, that's great. I think that the hybridpreneur concept was interesting because I think I struggled myself throughout my career, flip-flopping between being an entrepreneur, being an intrapreneur, being a bit of both, side hustling, working for more traditional organizations, working for innovative technology companies, a wide range of things. And it became really hard for people to understand, what does Saleema do? Who is she? What can I hire her for? She seems to be all over the place. And I could never pinpoint, okay, I want to do this one thing. I actually found myself flourishing when I actually was doing multiple things that were connected. To me, it all made sense. They were all connected in some way, even if they seemed very, very drastically different from each other. From teaching, from sharing my story, which was also something that I had to really work towards overcoming, since public speaking was not something that I did until just a few years ago. And it was because I realized that sharing my story was a way to build influence and have an impact in a way that would actually really help people. And so a lot of the things that I did, it just seemed like they were all over the place. And so what I started doing was building my personal brand, because it becomes very confusing when we try to hide it all under a company brand. And I noticed that myself and a lot of my entrepreneur friends were like, let's hide behind this company. And it's a way to sort of organize all our services. And it was very confusing because there was much more than just what that company offered. And I think that ultimately there's only so much we can do under a company. But I think that with a personal brand, your personal brand will evolve. And so being a hybridpreneur, you really have the flexibility to own your personal brand and be able to shape it in the way that you want to. And as you reinvent yourself and go into different versions of yourself throughout your entire life, companies will come and go, as we've seen just over the past 12 months. But you build your community, they'll follow you, they'll be part of you, you'll have those relationships no matter what direction you go in. And so I think being a hybridpreneur, which yes, my book does talk a lot about that. And really, essentially, it's not necessarily being, okay, I got to be an intrapreneur, an entrepreneur. You could be both, but it's really redefining that concept of entrepreneurship, where we need to figure out how to sustain ourselves financially. So profit is the first component. Passion, doing things that are you're passionate about, whether they're passion projects that you don't have to rely on the market terms for, whether it's starting a podcast, writing a book, doing something that really unleashes your passion. And it doesn't have to be your job. Not everyone finds their dream job or combines that. And so they can be side hustles. They can be, anything that you're really passionate about. And then the other two components are impact, where you're giving back to the community in some way. And so you're doing something, whether it's volunteer work, you're on a nonprofit board, you're being of service to other people, giving back in some way. Maybe you're teaching or sharing your story, or whatever that means to you. It could be charity work. And then keeping ourselves in our growth zone. So constant learning is the other component, where you're constantly challenging yourself to be out of your comfort zone. And I think that's incredibly important because it helps us adapt to these really challenging situations that we're constantly facing. So I think having those four components, embracing those four components, is what ultimately Hybridpreneur is about. And it really embraces the entrepreneurial mindset without having to be like, okay, now you got to either work for an organization or start a business. I think that you can do multiple things and find a way that works for you.
That's fascinating. And your whole approach and how you created your book, on that note where you mentioned that there are so many different practical takeaways and tools through the book. Would you mind please explaining how you developed it? What is the key message of it, and how this can help others propel them forward in this innovative way of being an entrepreneur and an innovator today?
Yeah, sure. So how I created the tools is interesting. I have, if you looked at my desk or my home now, I have tons of stickies and flip charts and all kinds of stuff. I had to keep going on and off the screen, from Miro board to, Google Sheets to flip charts and all kinds of stuff, just to work on that outline and to develop the tools. Because the first draft of, if you're an author, you might know this, but the first draft of your manuscript is really for yourself and writing your story. And it's very hard to step into the mind of the readers until you get everything out. And so that's the process I'm in right now, is really shaping it for the reader and continuing to finalize a lot of the tools and frameworks that I developed, which I think when I wanted to have something that was somewhat groundbreaking or novel. And I didn't want to just share my story or just share interview insights. I did interview 100 entrepreneurs and leaders and experts in different areas of innovation, leadership, and business. And I really wanted to bring it all together, but in a useful way. And so when I was trying really hard to create, the next business model canvas, or try to reinvent in some way, or redesign the design thinking process, and I got really stuck trying hard to create those tools. And so I said, you know what, let me just park that for now. Maybe I'm just not going to be that person. Maybe I need to have a PhD to do something like that. And so I just put that aside, and I focused on, interviewing people. I focused on what I was good at. I focused on sharing my story and writing my own stories out. And ultimately, eventually, just aha moments started to come, and I started to get those eureka moments, and ideas for those tools started showing up when I stopped trying so hard. And so that was a bit of the process. And it's I've been testing a lot of the tools on social media and through a beta community, and really trying to see, and with clients as well, trying to see what would be valuable to people. How can I make these tools better, so that I don't just launch a book that hasn't been tested or proven in some way. And I'd say that the main message of the book is to redefine innovation. I think that innovation has been such a technology focused term, focused on, cutting edge ideas and disruptive technology. And a lot of people shy away from that. But I think that is, having an innovative mindset is what will help us thrive in the future. And so that being said, I'm really trying to redefine innovation and make it about being human, where, it's about having these different human capabilities, such as resilience, self-awareness, having empathy, having, being able to collaborate, having a global mindset, being able to storytell. There's 12 different capabilities in my book, and essentially they're to help people thrive in the future. And so that's essentially the premise of the book. And innovation starts with I. Even though it starts with I, it happens with we, it happens with teams and communities, and it has a ripple impact on the world. But it does start with the individual. And I think that it's not an egocentric sort of approach, but rather if we think about some of the best innovators out there, let's take Steve Jobs. When he, founded Apple, and he actually got fired from his own company before coming back years later. He actually went through a reinvention process. Even before, in his teenage years, he went to India and searched for enlightenment. And we often forget about a lot of these stories, or the inputs, or what goes into the creative process when it comes to innovation, because we're used to just, the iPhone or the products that we see, and we call that innovation. But I think that innovation is really about that process that ignites that creativity to happen. And I think having that skill is important, and it starts with that self-awareness, which I think has often been underrated or overlooked when it comes to the innovation conversation.
Completely. And I believe it talks so much to the whole health approach to innovating, because of the need to really take good care of oneself and to pause and to reflect and to think and to say, who am I? And to value yourself and all that you bring to this moment. And I really honor you, Saleema, and want to acknowledge you for standing up and standing strong and standing for so many important messages, missions, work that our world is calling for, our earth is calling for, humanity is calling for. And the collaborative way of your leadership is really the way that we are all seeking to be moving forward. And you invite others to say, you are who you are in this moment for a purpose, and stand strong in that purpose and express it. So thank you, Saleema, for how you lead, and the great book that is coming out for all of us to benefit from. How can people access? I have already gotten my advanced copy, my ebook version. Can you share how everybody can access it?
Yeah, so the book is available on Indiegogo, which I can share. You can share the link later. And we had a very successful Indiegogo campaign back in August and raised over $36,000. And we managed to get the book into over 50 countries, and including, into organizations such as the World Health Organization and several organizations across the world. And so it is a very important message and a very important book. And I think that it can be for anyone that's trying to thrive in the future, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're a professional that's going through a pivot, and you're just really passionate about improving yourself and personal and professional growth. And so you can get a copy on Indiegogo. It's not available on Amazon until closer to the launch date. It's going to launch in probably April. We have to keep moving the date with everything going on in the world, and also, just taking the time to, as you said, take care as I do the editing and the entire process. That's very important, is being able to have that time to pause and reflect throughout that process before launching. So yeah, and that's pretty much it. It'll be in bookstores also when it launches this spring.
That's so exciting. And if anyone has any questions now, we can take them, or in the chat or live. And if not, Saleema, how can others also contact you as they have questions moving forward?
Yeah, sure. So if you'd like to contact me, you can reach out on social media. The best way is probably LinkedIn. If you find me on LinkedIn, connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on social media. My handle is always at Saleema Vellani, SaleemaVellani. And yeah, you'll find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube as well.
And I understand you're leading many different conversations moving forward. And so I really encourage people to engage with you, because you are such a catalyst, and the communities that you're forming around the world can include others who might have similar ideas or interests as you. And thus, as the world is looking for this kind of collaborative leadership and innovation, really seek the partnerships that Saleema calls for in her book and throughout her work. So thank you so much, Saleema, for sharing with us today. If you have any final thoughts before we close.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I do run a business accelerator, and we are recruiting some women entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs in general, although we are very passionate about having diversity and having women. And it is a 4-month program. We have different programs that support entrepreneurs. So if anyone is interested in improving, taking their business to the next level, growing their platform, growing their business, we are running that. And that's something that I've really had to prioritize, I would say, especially when the pandemic happened, is doing my life mission, and that's to help other entrepreneurs succeed. And so I've taken a more active role doing that with my company.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.